Hey YouTube, it's David from Live Forever or Die Trying. So it's been a little bit since I last uploaded. The good news is I've been on my goals. So we're in the 8th week now of the year and I've put down 10 books so far. The lack of uploads, including lack of the traditional booktube like wrap-up style videos, has been because I'm trying to read by topic. So I should have 2 fun videos coming out for you soon when I finish up reading the books in those series. One thing I do have for you today, though, is what I attempted to read kind of thematically when I went on a trip down to Roatan, Honduras. So Roatan, Honduras is a pretty cool place. It's a little island, part of the Bay Islands off of Honduras, and it sits on the Mesoamerican Reef. So I went down there to do my rescue diver certification, which was an absolute blast. Highly recommended. You become a better diver and you get the drown for the low price of $300. But while I was there, I knew I wanted to try to read something somewhat similar or somewhat related to the reason I was down there, scuba diving. I thought it'd be an interesting take, maybe would make the trip more interesting, or, I didn't really know what I was expecting, but I am glad I did it. So I picked up 3 books that I read while I was down there. So the first was The Soul of an Octopus by Simon Montgomery. Pretty interesting. Then we had Drawdown by Paul Hawken. And finally, we had The Deep. Now this is by River Solomon, but it's also with David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. So, starting off with one of the more obvious connections, Soul of an Octopus by Simon Montgomery. Now, I picked this up because I've seen octopuses in Honduras previously. Fun fact, and this book will teach you it, octopuses is the correct terminology. And I'm going to butcher the reasoning, but I believe it's because you don't put a Latin suffix with a Greek word or a Greek suffix with a Latin word. I'll look that up afterwards and make sure I'm not making a fool of myself. But yeah, octopuses. Anyways, so I've seen them there previously, small reef octopuses. And they're really fascinating creatures. One of my favorites. There's a reason I've got one. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Is that good? Is that good? Let me try this. Maybe? No? There you go. There's a reason I have one tattooed on me. And when I picked up this book, judging from the title and the subtitle, a surprising exploration into the wonder of consciousness, I thought this was almost going to be a mix of science and philosophy. They were going to take what we currently knew about consciousness, where it comes from, the suspected actions in the brain that lead to it, and apply it to kind of the physiology of an octopus. They have a distributed web of neurons around their body, so instead of having like a singular brain, they have like a distributed brain where their arms can act independently. And I thought I was gonna kind of weave in some philosophical elements to argue a case and put you in a perspective. This is my first book by Simon Montgomery, and probably if I read more of the author, I would have seen it coming that this was not going to be that. Kind of early on in the book, I realized this was going to end up being more of a memoir, where Cy works at an aquarium, but also does like naturalistic work. I won't spoil too much of it because it does read like a story and it does get emotional. So if you are in for a memoir about octopuses, good book. But if you're like me and then we're expecting a more scientific or philosophical approach, I'd say skip it. But yeah, I rated it 3 stars out of 5. I would probably pick it up again if I was itching for a naturalist memoir. But what I was going for wasn't here. That's probably a mistake on my expectations more than the author's part, but entertaining read. Next up, this beauty of a book, Drawdown. Subtitled, The Most Comprehensive Plan Ever Proposed to Reduce Global Warming, edited by Paul Hawken. Now, this is a absolutely beautiful book. Every page, I don't know if we can see this here. Every page has just gorgeous photos and a bunch of information. And basically what it does is, in this book, we break down 100 strategies to actually take greenhouse gases and carbon out of the atmosphere. So, like the title of this book, what they're focusing on is actually drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. So different systems that can either prevent carbon from getting into the atmosphere, or greenhouse gases in general, or either extract it from the air. So it touches on everything from technologies to like individual best practices to renewable energies and everything in between. So just to read like a few of these off as examples, they talk about smart highways, coastal wetlands, landfill methane, insulation, household recycling, women smallholders, family planning, tree intercropping, biochar, airplanes, and so much more. I don't know if y'all can read this, maybe pause Zoom, probably not. But there's so many just absolutely amazing approaches to climate change that most of us probably haven't even thought of. And it's almost empowering. Like, the way the news is these days, everything's just such doom and gloom that really all you can do is be scared. But this book provides actionable steps on how we can kind of save the world. If I was to critique it, I would say this book only really works in a capitalistic approach. It's pretty much written from investment perspectives. So how much these programs would cost to implement, how much they could save, and specifically for like the farming techniques and whatnot, it really tries to action on the capitalistic system, why there's economic incentive to not fuck up the earth. So it's probably for good reason. This is probably like a good way of getting the people with power to actually action on these steps, but I wish it didn't have to be that way, you know? Finally, we have The Deep. Now, this book I actually found out by another booktuber, Patrick J, and I just stumbled across one of his videos where he was kind of raving, doing an unboxing and like super excited. And I don't read fiction. It had an interesting thumbnail, really attractive, kind of like drew me in. So I started watching the video and something struck me. It was co-authored by Daveed Diggs. And if you don't know who he is, he's from Clipping, which is an experimental hip-hop rap group. And they do really, really cool world-building songs. So they have like a rap song from the perspective of a space-age slave. And it's not corny. It's actually really sweet and atmospheric. So that caught my eye. I looked into this book, and it turns out this is an exquisite corpse of the song, The Deep. So, if you're not familiar, an exquisite corpse is where you take one small aspect of a work, whatever form of media it is, and you spin it off into your own creation. So, this particularly went off of a lyric, which I believe says, "Y'all remember," in the song by Clipping. And talks about, from a mermaid's perspective, this one mermaid has the responsibility of remembering the entire history of her people, has an emotional breakdown, tries to solve it, and I won't spoil more than that, but just the concept of the book itself, like so experimental, is just really neat. Now, personally, I didn't love the writing. I liked the atmosphere that was painted. I kind of wish there was more details, but I'm not a fiction reader. And it had somewhat of a non-ending. So, it didn't really do much for me, but I'm not upset I read it. I'd probably rate it 3.5 stars out of 5, and I would highly recommend it if you're into mermaids, if you're into kind of weird fiction. It almost kind of reads dystopian and kind of without hope. Kind of like a despairing type of vibe to it. Or, if you're a fan of Clipping, it's worth just expanding the universe that he's creating by reading this somewhat small book. Yeah, so that's what I read in Roatan Honduras. I thought it was really interesting to read what I did where I was. So the Mermaid book didn't really make any connections with me in Honduras. Climate change book, that one really kind of hit home. When we are around the island, you see signs everywhere about coral bleaching, about environmental impacts. They have plastic straws banned and other actions to try to stop the onslaught that is global warming. And that really hit home. And seeing the hope that they had in the community at Roatan, as well as connecting that with the feeling of hope I got from this book, really made me feel something. So that book, reading in that location, was probably more valuable than if I just read it on my own. It made the point stick. It made me want to take action and actually do something. And then finally, Soul of the Octopus. I didn't love the book. I liked it. But I did find an appreciation when I was down on that night dive, sitting in a current, watching the octopus with its 8 tentacles crawl and change colors and observe us observing it. That was really cool. And this book kind of humanized or personified that experience for me. I felt like there was a second set of eyes looking back at me, but like actually someone or something, a consciousness behind those eyes. So it probably made me have like a better appreciation for that animal itself, more so than I already had. But yeah, so that's kind of how that worked out for me. Real quick, if you like this type of video, let me know. I'm enjoying reading by topic, and kind of connecting these books with the spaces was really cool for me. I'm hoping to do something like this more often if this is hitting on anything for y'all. Other than that, coming up on 500 subs, that's pretty sweet. I gotta thank y'all for that. If y'all have any critiques at all, whether it's filming, do you want music in the background, whatever, let me know in the comments. I'm trying to improve these things for you. Anyways, should have some more coming up for you soon. See you around.